when I started this, one of the things that I find with the people that I touch in the world, people that I meet, people that I help, people that I coach, or just people that I'm around, is that they really lack a sense of self-awareness. They lack an understanding of who they are, what's driving them, and what are they driving toward, right? And a lot of times they can't figure out what their dreams are because they don't know who they are. And so, having been through just about every personality type test that they have one for, that's not like a joke or a game. Like I took one of my buddies sent me today, trying to figure out what sci-fi character you were. He was Darth Vader. I was Spock. Um, those are kind of fun just to pass time. I wouldn't put any like trust in. I'm Spock. That's who I'm destined to be, right? But when I started making the content, it was more just, hey, here's some tools that you can use to start to self-actualize. Because the one thing that I've repeated across the board from the beginning is that one, I don't believe there's any such thing as these 16 or 4 or 8 or 19, whatever it is, boxes that we can just fit everybody comfortably into. And you'll get people that argue with me about that. They're like, if you were a fill in the blank Myers Briggs type, these are your cognitive functions and this is how you work, and you're typically a jerk. And it's like, well, even Dr. Jung didn't agree with that. Like, the dude who Myers Briggs is based on didn't agree with a lot of what goes on today in the discussions. And what a lot of people don't realize, and this is where it can be damaging, is part of the reason why Myers-Briggs specifically has been perpetuated for so long, even though modern science and books like this, which we'll talk about later, is pretty much all but disproved that the Myers-Briggs test is viable, right? The reason why it caught on was because the people that got behind it were amazing storytellers. Thus, they were amazing marketers. They did the same thing that horoscopes did. I don't put any value in horoscopes. I don't believe in them. I think they're overly generic. Like anything that you say about any person in a horoscope could be applicable to any other person, given a circumstance or a life experience that puts them in a different state of mind. Right. The other thing I've been saying from the beginning, and this is the most important part, is I believe the ancient proverb that says, and I'm going to quote the proverb the way it's written, and then I'll make it diverse. Okay. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. You are who you say you are. You are who you think you are. You can control that. Well, wait a minute, B. You told me that personality, according to modern science, is actually more genetic than learned. Yep. And I think that we have a hand in how our genes progress. Right? A lot of people don't realize that. Study epigenetics, right? Like epigenetic stem cell research right now, for example. People that truly believe, and science has shown, they just need to be able to test it and do it with humans, that you can go in, take, and I'm going to violently oversimplify this and butcher it because I'm not a biologist, okay? You can basically replace somebody's broken cells with good cells and remove disease, remove sickness. And in fact, there's a lot of scientists right now that believe they're going to be able to cure death. Now, whether or not that happens remains to be seen. But the point there is, yes, I do think you are born with default settings. But I believe that you have a hand in how those default settings evolve over time. And I believe that personality is a moving target. So tests like the Myers-Briggs, they try to fit you comfortably into this box, right? And this is you. You're an INFP, for example. That's the one we talk about the most on the channel. I'll tell you why, for those of you that don't already know, because I made a video about it. A lot of people are like, why do you make so many of these videos? I'm like, I made a video explaining why I made so many of these videos, but YouTube doesn't make things easy to search, so don't worry about it. I'll explain it. I don't think anybody fits comfortably into a box. At any given time, I think any of you could relate to, in some way, shape, or form, any of the 16 boxes, regardless of your cognitive functions. The people who think that it's just this black and white religion, and that's what really put me off about it, was I started running into people online who treat this Myers-Briggs thing like a religion. And what they're really treating like a religion is just really good storytelling that's not rooted in good science. You know, the standard deviation and margin of error for Myers-Briggs is high. I think it's over 50% or right around 50% of people who take the test score differently within months of taking it or weeks of taking it the first time. And that's because it's really hard for a human to self-actualize and be honest about who we are, given our insecurities and some of those things that we deal with mentally and emotionally. So I don't think the test in and of itself is damaging. In fact, I think it has some value, which is why I didn't walk away from it completely, right? But I did have an ulterior motive. I'll share that a little bit later in the video. But I don't think it's completely useless, because one of the things the Myers-Briggs does for people who have no experience with personality or understanding psychology or understanding themselves is it puts you on a path of self-actualizing. You are faced with a question about yourself, and you have to critically think through, where do I fit on this spectrum of answers? And I believe questions and curiosity are really the beginning of understanding your personality and understanding who you are as a person. And then being able to have that self-awareness that leads to success. All right, so from that perspective, I do think the Myers-Briggs test has some value. And when you go back to Jungs' philosophies and his studies, that are somewhat outdated now and modern science has improved upon, uh, and there were other scientists who were doing things other than Freud and Jung that informed a lot of what's going on now, right? One of the things that I think it does an okay job with is it's trying to show you really two things. Because when Jung was doing it, it wasn't extroverts and J's and P's, all that stuff was added after the fact, right? What Jung was trying to help people understand, at least from the way I understand what's written, is we want to help you understand how you make decisions. We want to help you understand how you process information. And you're born with a default setting for how that works. And I think that's pretty accurate. Now, whether the Myers-Briggs measures that the best or something else does, that can be debated. But I have a responsibility to all of you if I'm going to in any way, shape, or form coach you or share information with you. And I'll preface that with, I'm not always right. I don't know everything. What I say is not gospel. And it certainly, what I say doesn't always apply to everybody. But I have a responsibility to give you better information if there's better information out there, and not let you fall into this trap of, well, all ISTJs are jerks or anal. Like, none of that stuff's true. Like, I'll hear people in my comments say, yo, I could never date a fill in the blank type because this. And I'm like, none of that has anything to do, like, that's an issue with you being inflexible. That's an issue with you lacking agreeability. It has nothing to do with the fact that they process information in an ordered structure versus seeing the whole picture and then breaking it down. It has very little to do with that at all. And so I started seeing this kind of Myers-Briggs religion where people were using it to make these decisions. And I even have videos about, what kind of career best suits this personality type, right? The ulterior motive of me having those discussions was to get you all to begin to self-actualize, but also at the end of the day, because some people actually sniffed it out. Some people wrote comments, and it's not like I was trying to do it underhandedly. It was that if I just came out and said it, it didn't really need to be said, but maybe it bears saying. Some people started to sniff it out. They'd watch my video and be like, wait a minute, bro. Everything you just said here could apply to anybody, not just an INFP. And I'm like, exactly. That's the point, right? That's the point. I am working to share information with you about developing self-awareness regardless of what your personality type is. I use Myers-Briggs as a Trojan horse, essentially, if you know the story of the Trojan horse, to get good information to you. And part of it is too, it's just math. It's the way YouTube works. Like, if I put INFP or INFJ in the title of my video, it's guaranteed to get into more people's inboxes, right? So I have good information that I want to share. I mean, go and look at the video I shot for why entrepreneurs need to have a strong personal brand. It's an amazing video about branding and why it's so important. And by the way, even if you don't own a business, that video is going to be important for you in the next 5 to 10 years. You're going to have to build a personal brand because you're all going to be consultants at some point. Going to work at a job for 30 years is over. Like, it's not a thing anymore. Go to college for 4 or 5 years, get a job for 30 years and retire. It's dead. And so you're going to have to start being able to build a brand and get attention because you're going to want people to pay you for your skills. And that's, by the way, that's the way it's going to work in 10 years. So it's this idea of, that video is amazing, but because of the way YouTube works, it's not going to show it to anybody because I don't have any authority right now. I will. But it's, if I can say, okay, INFP, and a lot of my videos weren't just a Trojan horse. These are questions people who claim to have this personality type are asking me. Like, I didn't come up with these titles. This is comments that I get, questions that I get privately on Facebook. People say, hey, can you do a video about this? I don't want to really leave the comment on your YouTube page because this is private, but you could just make a video generically and not name me. So the idea there was to get you all to start self-actualizing. Remember, as a person thinks in their heart or their spirit, that's so are you. I truly believe that, and I believe you can adjust who you are over time. I don't believe in this you're a fixed personality. And this is where Myers-Briggs gets damaging because, one, keep in mind Myers-Briggs is like a $20 million a year industry. The government uses it, churches use it, they hire consultants to come in. So many of you have probably taken the Myers-Briggs test for free online. It's a little bit different when you pay for it. Now, it's not much better, right? The consultants will tell you, no, you need to take the paid version because it's more in depth. It really isn't. It's not that much better. But consultants will tell you that because they got to sell you stuff, right? And so I've been on both sides of that. And in order for it to make money, they have to convince people that it's viable. But I can tell you from administering it and having it administered to me in a paid environment, different consultants teach it differently. I've had people say you are either an extrovert or an introvert. I've had people teach that, well, it's a preference thing. You prefer one or the other, but you can move in between the two. And I've had people say, no, you're on a scale. I've had consultants teach all three. I've had people in comments read other people's blogs and websites, and you have your own opinions, and that's fine. I'm not saying you're wrong, right? But the damaging factor there is not only is the way Myers-Briggs is administered inconsistent, the test itself has a huge margin of error, and it's being used. I just believe that the test, and I didn't really see it until I started creating content of my own and seeing how people reacted to it. I thought a lot of things would be a little bit more open-minded, a little bit more objective, and taking everything that we're doing, as I always say, with a grain of salt. But people were getting really strong into, what we call the certainty bias, where it's, I believe this and it is, and you're wrong if you disagree with me. When I started seeing that, it was like, this is not, I don't believe in pigeonholing people into 16 comfortable boxes. I think the human mind and the human soul are insanely too complex for a test like that to do it, right? So I want to caution you all against, please don't try to go find a husband or wife based on your personality type. Now, I would make videos like that, but if you remember, like I made an INFP who should you date video. If you remember the beginning of the video, I prefaced it with, this doesn't matter. Like, you can date anybody if you're a good enough, mature enough person. But here are some traits from the INFPs that I've observed, or the INFJs, whatever it is, that may come into play for you. But at the end of the day, it's about developing as a person, not so much just saying, because I'm this type, I'm not allowed to date this type. It's like people want an overly simplified answer for everything. And it's not just personality. When I coach people in marketing, or like if I'm teaching a copyright class, people want a black and white. Can I do it or can I not? I'm like, well, the law is not black and white, brother. It's, well, just give me the simple answer. There's not always a simple answer. All right, so what I want to do is just caution you all against, not against taking the Myers-Briggs or having a personality type. I'm an ENTJ, hooray. But don't put all your eggs in the basket. Don't pigeonhole yourself. And don't fall into the trap of being closed-minded or having these limiting beliefs that because I'm this type, I can't fill in the blank. One of the things, I'll give you an example, when I was doing INFP videos, it's like, I can't focus the way the world wants me to focus. That is a lie. It has nothing to do with your capability. It has everything to do with your willingness. And most of the people responded, but don't you know the pain that's going to cause? But the pain is in your mind, which I'm teaching you, you have control over. The pain is there because you framed it that way. Right? You framed it such that if I have to go through this thing, it's going to hurt really bad. And so when you go through it, it hurts really bad because you got what you were believing for. Right? And so I truly believe, like, for example, one of the things I teach when I'm coaching my students is I've trained myself when I do workouts to love the pain. Why? Because the pain means I'm growing and I'm getting healthier. You can totally do that. Now, granted, I have an unfair advantage because I've been trained to do that. I was a military officer for a number of years and a cadet for 5 years before that. So I had been trained on how to do a lot of the things that I coach you guys on. So I really wanted to say, just be careful. Like, I don't mind you taking Myers-Briggs tests. Like I said, I think there's value in it. Helps you self-actualize. It helps you start to ask good questions about yourself. A lot of the introvert extrovert questions are stupid, but that's whatever. It helps you start to self-actualize, but it also helps you, if you're open-minded and you're objective, you can have conversations with other people who are wired differently than you, and you can all learn something from one another. Like, so we always kind of happen to say people who are feelers make decisions based on people, whether it's themselves as an introverted feeler or other people as an extroverted feeler. And throughout my experience, there's been some truth to that, right? Whereas a thinker may be thinking about outcomes and practicality and efficiencies. Feelers thinking about how is this going to affect the group. And in most cases, I've seen that to be true. So I think there is some value there, right? I'm not in the camp where, oh, it's all BS, because there's a lot of scientists who are like, just stop it. And that's cool, but science gets better over time, right? We thought the world was flat a long time ago. And some people still think it's flat. Right? So that's kind of how I wanted to intro this. It can be damaging because it can cause limiting beliefs. It can cause you to pigeonhole yourself and be closed-minded. And it can cause you to miss out on opportunities because instead of developing the willingness to mature and adapt, right? You know how many people I run into from a Myers-Briggs perspective, like, we can't tell that you're not a feeler. I know that because I present myself a certain way when I'm in certain crowds. I know how to move in and out of different behaviors that are related to personality types, but I'm in control of that, right? My default setting is probably not so much, but guess what? If you practice something long enough over and over and over again, it overrides the default setting, which again is why I don't like the boxes. I'm an ENTJ. I can totally relate to INFJs, right? I can totally get it, at least the ones I've met, right? INFP, same thing. My wife's an ENFJ. Awesome. Right? So I can relate to a lot of those different things. And I owe it to you all not to allow you, well, you can do whatever you want, but to at least inform you, don't go down this religion path of the Myers-Briggs is the answer to everything. I'm going to decide who I marry and where I work. I had someone ask me, can an INFP be a computer programmer? Absolutely. If you like computer programming, it's not a box. Now, by and large, do most of the INFPs I meet want to be, coders? No. But how much of that is self-actualization? You've told yourself that story 1,000 times, so now you believe it. And how much of it is actually your personality? And that's where the kind of the balance is. Let's take some comments here, and then we'll get into how do we not just talk about the damaging aspects of how Myers-Briggs, I've watched Myers-Briggs get people into some very not healthy thinking, but what are some solutions? The answer is in this book, as my friend Mark Bustler would say. All right, here we go. Super Megamon says, what did you mean by charge it to my head and not to my heart? Charge it to a mental error and not an error of intent. Okay? Charge it to my head means I made a mistake. Charging it to my heart means I intended to do wrong. Right? So in my heart, I intended to do wrong versus in my head, I just made a mistake. I was wrong, right? Mistake versus intent to harm. Austin Williams says, that is very true about people being in control of their own mind. What do you think of the Jungian analytical psychology theory? For Myers-Briggs, this provides a much better understanding of the type. So one of the things I like about Jung is his more strategic view of what he created. Right? Like if you look at a person like Darwin, he refuted a lot of the things that he said, even some of the stuff we still support today. He was like, dude, he was saying you can't pigeonhole people into these boxes, right? And he would never fall into this camp. And when he was doing it, there was only 4 boxes. There weren't 16 that a sales lady and a stay-at-home mom invented. But he understood, and I think he understood well, that our personality is a moving target. So I will tell you straight up, I don't even like the idea of personality types. And going back to what I said about my kind of ulterior motive was I made a lot of Myers-Briggs content because I knew a lot of people liked it, and it was a way for me to get in front of you so I can then build some trust and rapport with you and then show you, kind of take you on a journey. Because if I just came out and said it, a lot of times that doesn't work with people. Like if I just disrupt everything you think and say this is better, people will resist that. But it was the goal is to take people on a journey to there's better ways. Modern science evolved over time, has a better way to do this than what Myers-Briggs is capable of doing, right? So I like the temperaments that Jung came up with, where it's, you've got these folks that process information in a structured fashion or in an ordered fashion versus seeing a whole picture and then being able to pull out pieces of it. Like there is some truth to that. Just like making decisions based upon outcomes and efficiencies versus making decisions based on people is a thing. Where I have a problem with it is any test that tries to tell me I'm either or. It's not true. I am both. I'm definitely both. I may just be stronger in one than the other, and I won't believe a test that tells me I'm just stuck. I can never improve. I can totally exercise extroverted feeling because I know what it is and I know the behaviors of it. And if I put it in my toolkit and I do it over and over and over again, I can make it part of who I am. As a person thinks in their spirit, in their heart, so are they. That's where I start running into issues where a test is just going to tell me, this is who you are. You're welcome. You're stuck there forever. Don't marry an S-type. Like that's ludicrous. It's absolutely ludicrous. Let's see. Austin says, if it's not too much trouble, check out C.S. Joseph Life. The box says C.S. Joseph. Dang it. Check him out on YouTube. All right. Super Megamon says, if anything, we're all like constantly shifting Rubik's Cubes with each block randomly leaving and arriving. Not to fit anyone in a box, but it's all, yes, it's very much human nature. Our brain has what's called heuristics, which is our tendency to take shortcuts because we cannot process the infinite amount of information that comes at us on a given day. So our brain likes to take shortcuts, so we like to categorize. We like to put things in boxes. That's a human tendency because it makes it easier. Like if I say that's a white guy or a black female, it makes it easy for you to associate what that means, even though there's no such thing as a white guy or a black female in terms of white people and black people aren't a thing. It's a social construct that we invented. You see what I mean? So yeah. Van Mon says, so 6 months ago I took the Myers-Briggs test several times. It kept coming up INTJ. 1 month ago it said INFJ. The tests were helpful but nothing to live by. People are too complex to be defined by a single test. Correct. Anna Anderson says, okay, she's talking to him. The box says, actually, you have to ignore the test and understand the functions. And so people scream that all the time. Totally understand the functions. Here to tell you that the functions are just a more complicated way to bend people. And I think there's some value in the functions. I do. But to say, these are your functions, like it's too rigid. And it's just not accurate. Because if a person tests 6 months, he just told you he tested one way, now he tested another way. Well, those are two different function stacks. Which one's the right one? Let's see. Let's see. Austin Williams says, if you can look at his website, he provides a much simpler way to type other people and how the four sides of the mind affect everyone. Yeah. And so I don't like, and modern science, where this book I keep flashing comes from, we don't like typing. I think the problem lies in typing. What this test is measuring is how you score on a scale for facets that every human across the globe, because they've tested this around the world, not in America, not in Germany, like everyone has these certain tendencies, and it's actually measuring things that can be measured. Thinking is not something that can actually be measured. But how flexible you are as a person is something we can begin to measure. Like, okay, cool, right? How honest are you at any given time can be measured, right? You can take an inventory of those things. And that type of test where it's like, here is a snapshot of who you are right now in this moment today. And what I love about this test is it actually shows you where you have some challenges, where you can make some fixes to yourself. You can start to make some adjustments to who you are, which I think is way more valuable to people than just telling them, here, you just fit into this comfortable type. There you go. Enjoy yourself. Let's see. Rachel says, this video is what I needed to hear since the test and me believing some nonsense make me kind of confused. Thank you. Jewel says, I finally made it to alive. Yeah, what's up, Jewel? Jewel says, big fan of you, BC. I like your style. Big fan of you, too. Thank you. Jewel says, I'm an INFP computer programmer. Whoever asks him that question, you can do it. Yeah, and they actually already were a computer programmer. Jimmy Regan says, or Reagan says, how do you unlearn bad thoughts and belief? By replacing them with good thoughts and sticking to those. Anytime the bad thought comes up, you shut it down and put the good thought in its place. And it's focus, but let me be more specific. It's focus. If you have a bad belief, the reason why it's there and the reason why it's affecting you is because you're focusing on it. You need to find a good belief and focus on that. Like even one of my practices is saying things out loud until I believe them. If you say something out loud enough times, you will definitely believe it. It's just, it takes practice. And what most people don't understand is changing your mind is in an instant. Keeping your mind changed is a lifelong process. What most people want is, I'm going to change my mind now. And then the bad thought comes back and they're like, oh, I failed. No, you didn't. It takes practice to replace a bad thought or a bad habit. Let's see. Ineffable Wound says, yup, being fatalistic about cognitive functions. It's silly. Personality is just about familiar defaults. Psyche dysfunction is just about conflict of default patterns of cognitive function. Yeah, so, yeah, outside of the laws of physics, there's not too many things that I'm going to believe in black and white, and even those I think are arguable as we evolve as a species. But yeah, so really, I don't really need to talk long about this. This doesn't need to be a 2-hour video where I pontificate for another hour about how damaging personality tests can be, especially when they try to fit you into a box or a color or a thing that you are. And because remember, like one of the tests they used to prove that a lot of personality tests were kind of hocus pocus was they put everybody in a room, had them take a test, and then they handed them, here's the description of you. And to a person, they're all like, yep, that describes me exactly. And then what you found out after the fact was they all got the same sheet of paper. Right? It's like horoscopes. Horoscopes work because it's good storytelling. It's talking about things you're actually, it's talking about the 4 human facets that you care about, which is love and human relationships, right? It's career, it's education, and it's happiness. And they just tell really good stories. Like, because you're this, I don't know all the signs, sorry. Your tendency is to, ooh, yeah, I do have that tendency. Right? It's self-actualization. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So those are the things that I want you all to think about. Don't want you to run away from the Myers-Briggs or walk away from this video thinking, oh, it's all BS. I don't think it's all BS. I think there were smart scientists who built it, and it laid the foundation for more modern science to come in and improve upon it. And so this book that I keep flashing in front of you is called The H Factor of Personality, right? And so what evolved over time, they created this test called the Big Five once upon a time, and it was measuring traits of a person on a scale, and it measured the H factor in this case is honesty and humility, right? Now it's the Big Six because they've added another trait, which is the O in hexaco. So if you heard me talk about the hexaco test, it's honesty and humility, it's emotionality, it's extroversion, it's agreeableness, conscientiousness, and openness to new experience got added after the fact. And this was put together over, I think, 3 decades. And the science dates back to the 30s, and it evolved, 1930s over time. And over 3 decades, they're like, okay, what are common human traits that we all share? And they tested it. They tested and tested and tested and came up with, okay, it's these 5. And then they added a 6th. You know, and notice it says extroversion. It doesn't say you're an introvert and extrovert. And what they're measuring too is not just, I'm an introvert so I like isolation, or I'm an extrovert so I love being at parties. I am technically an extrovert. I don't usually like going to parties unless it's a very specific crowd. Like, I don't like being in crowds just for the sake of being in crowds, even though I'm a quote unquote max extrovert. What this is measuring you is on a scale of extroversion, not whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. It's like, how willing are you? How outgoing are you? Not just with humans and how much you talk, but in experiences, right? And it's showing you that. And it's not saying either one is right or wrong. If you have low extroversion, it's cool. If you have high extroversion, it's cool. I think the only category that I think is interesting from a score being good or bad is emotionality. Usually the extremes, like if you score extremely low or extremely high, it's usually not great. Emotionality is one of those ones where I think it's better that you score low. If you score extremely high, you're going to have real serious problems. But it's the test is measuring things that are actually measurable, like fearfulness. It can ask you a series of questions about how you would react in a certain situation. That reaction is a fear-based reaction, and so it can assess you, and it's comparing you to other people. It's not comparing you to like a standard of this is fearfulness. It's on a scale of 1 to 8 billion people, here's where you fall as far as fearfulness, and then it shows you where the average or the median person falls, right? So if you're north of the median, you deal with fearfulness a lot heavier, or anxiety more than other people. And these are things that have been able to be measured and treated for years. And I think that's a more effective way to look at personality and who you are, because again, it makes you a moving target. It gives you information that you can then take back and start to make some changes, right? For example, I score extremely low in emotionality, like off the charts low, and it's great because I don't have a lot of fearfulness or anxiety, et cetera, et cetera. There's facets under each one of the traits. The problem is I could be too accepting of risk, right? There may be a situation where my high threshold for risk may not be a good thing. It could put people in danger. It could put me in danger because I'm willing to accept risk. Now, granted, some of that's based upon definitely my default DNA, but it's also because I have training and I've been in places where risk was so high and I didn't have a choice that most of the risk that I encounter in civilian life really isn't that serious, right? Nobody in real life, at least not yet, has tried to chase me down the street with an RPG and try to blow me up, right? So those are things to think about. If you haven't taken the Hexaco test, if you haven't heard me talk about it, I definitely recommend it. But I want to not steer you away from taking Myers-Briggs test. You want to take them, but just take them with a grain of salt. Don't get into this religious dogmatic, this is your cognitive function stack. You can't be anything different than this. I have a lot of ENTJ friends. I can tell you we're all very different on different spectrums, right? Even though we technically have the same personality type. All right, so Ineffable Wound says, I don't see the point in self-analysis outside of troubleshooting in regards to desired outcomes, which transcends matters of introvert or judging. Of course it does. And you hit the nail on the head. The reason why we do self-analysis is because if Freud was right, and really the goal of this human existence is to eke out some semblance of happiness, in order to do that, we have to be able to define for ourselves what that happiness is and what are the catalysts, what are the outcomes we need to get to that happiness. The only way we get there is by being self-aware, because if we don't know how we're going to react in a certain situation, what motivates us, right? What are our core values? What are, these 5 pillars of self-awareness that I talk about in a lot of my coaching? If we don't know those things, it doesn't empower us to make the best optimal decision. So self-awareness is actually about optimal decision making towards desired outcomes. So you're 100% right. That's exactly what self-analysis is all about. It's understanding how I'm wired, what my outcomes are, and how I affect decisions that get me to those outcomes in ways that don't put me in a negative state. So I think you hit the nail on the head. Well said. All right. So that said, that's really all I wanted to drive home with all you all tonight. I don't need to talk for 2 hours, like I said. Let's get into some questions. What do you guys have for me? We still got a lot of people on the call tonight. And I know, hey, apologies too for starting late. If you saw my comment, if you follow my community page where I post things, I posted, hey, we're starting at 10 o'clock yesterday. And then my wife somehow didn't get that message. She was out running errands and Then she was like, "Hey, I'm on my way home." I was like, "I have a show in 15 minutes." uh, and like, so I'm here with my kids. They're asleep now, but they weren't. And so like I couldn't start the show because I was putting kids to sleep, but my wife was supposed to be here to do it. But miscommunications, yo. That's how it works. Let's see what we got here. All right, no questions. How many of you? So let me ask you guys a question, guys and ladies. How many of you are in my 52 book challenge? Say I in the comment section. Nobody? And I know it takes like 30 seconds for you guys to see, for you to hear what I'm saying. So Jules in there. Cool. While you guys are answering, Caitlin Ruffin is in there. Excellent. That okay? So for those of you who are in there, as you're still commenting, are you getting anything good out of it? Is it actually helping you? I'm gonna get some real live feedback here and put myself out there. Everyone will be like, "No, it sucks." Here live, which I know it doesn't suck, but it'd be interesting. Got a lot of books here because a lot of these are books. These are books that we're going to be talking about here in the near future. The next book I'm going to be covering, because I know all of you are on different weeks out of the 52 weeks. This is the next book I'll be covering. So depending on where you are, you'll eventually get to that book. I think that's week 12 right there. I think everyone in the program is only up to week 9 so far. Yeah, 9, 10, 11. Yeah, everybody's only up to week 8 or 9. But that's going to be week 12 or 13, whichever one it is. Jimmy Reagan says, I signed up and never started. Why didn't you start, man? So I just posted a link for those of you who aren't in the program. And by the way, it's all free. This isn't like paid program stuff. This is straight up just me finding ways to continue to add value to you all, and not just on YouTube and doing videos here, like creating programs that help you learn things and do things. And you're not just learning from me, like you're learning from people way smarter than me that I learned from. J.R. Smallwood says, I just clicked on the link and I'm going to look into it. Sounds intriguing. Awesome. Jewel Scott says, it sounds like Jill Scott, the way I said that. I'm always receptive to book recs. That said, my Kindle library is already off the charts. We're talking hundreds, so I try to be choosy about which books I read. That's actually one of the reasons why I started the program, is so that people could weed through crappy books. Every book that I'm recommending in this program is a life-changing must read, and I'm sticking to those types of books specifically so that we don't, because I read a book. What book did I read? I read a book this week, because you guys know I read 3 books a week, and I read this book on coaching, and I was just like, ugh, this book sucks. Like, I was excited to read it because it looked interesting, and then I was like, this is like preschool level stuff, and not in a good way, right? Not in like a fundamentals way, just in a, this is really kitschy, kind of sing-songy, and I was like, right? So one of the things the program will help you with is showing you the books you theoretically should be reading. All right. Jimmy Reagan says, I didn't want too much head knowledge. I think too much. I don't want. So the knowledge isn't your problem. Your thinking is the problem. More knowledge isn't going to hurt you. Van Mon says, I quit smoking by first meditating on the fact that it was pleasurable and destructive. I replaced the thought and desire to smoke with the thought and desire to be healthy. Difficult at first, absolutely, but you're onto it, man. Jimmy Reagan says, I'm going soon, though. Just need to relax. Cool. Christian Jackson says, hello, Mr. Chambers. Mr. Chambers, wow. Am I that old? You are doing an excellent job. Thank you for serving the country. May God bless you all the days of your life. I received that blessing. I agree with it, and I thank you for it. Thanks for the kind words. Asian Pikachu says, I probably should go to libraries to get books since I can't get books on Amazon since my financial situation isn't good right now. Absolutely right. And some of the books I recommend are actually free. I purposefully have picked books like The Art of War, which you don't have to go buy, and you don't have to go to the library. You can just go to internetarchive.com and download a PDF copy of it because those books are no longer under copyright. Let's see. Bosma says, I'm so interested to hear your thoughts on how would depression affect an ENTJ personality, because ENTJs are mostly portrayed in that strong, indestructible personality. Yeah, which is all, and that's what I'm talking about. Like, that's a fable. it's a myth, fable, and it's just a lie. Like, we're not indestructible. We're not always strong. You know, people perceive body language and method of speech for what's going on internally, and that's not always the case. Like, we handle depression. Each individual handles depression uniquely. Forget about the personality type. Everybody handles depression uniquely because their depression is unique. I've dealt with depression before. The way I've handled it could be very different than another ENTJ or another person. Right? So I don't think and here's the other problem with the Myers-Briggs. So much of the crap that people talk about is just correlations. There's no scientific, this personality type is this thing, right? Like, ENTJs are strong, indomitable personality. It's beyond false, right? Some ENTJs are psychopaths. His behavior has very little to do with the fact that he's an ENTJ. He's a psychopath, right? So, and I've worked with people who have met ENTJs who were borderline psychopathic. So, yeah, it's, if you want to talk about personally how someone handles depression, I think that's a more valuable discussion. But how you handle it as a personality type, I think that's also where the Hexaco test could benefit you, because it'll show you different things, different facets of you that could be contributing to your depression. And those are things that you can address. Let's see. Jewel Scott says, why do you like the book Managing Oneself so much? I read it expecting more. Everybody does. Maybe I should read it again. I may not be appreciating the simplicity. So here's the problem. I get that a lot. The reason why Managing Oneself is so good is because so many times people are looking for complex answers to very simple problems. Managing oneself is about the fundamental things that you have to get right every time, every day to be successful, right? Michael Jordan practiced bounce passes. Why would Michael Jordan practice bounce passes? Why would Phil Jackson make Michael Jordan practice bounce passes? He's the best basketball player that's ever lived, because the fundamentals are what matter. When Peter Drucker said, most people think they know what they're good at and most people are wrong, that's important, because we go through our life thinking one way and then realize, ooh, wrong direction. And we don't know how to do the feedback analysis to understand, are we going in the right direction? Right? And one of my favorite quotes from the book is, you cannot be successful in an organization where the values don't match. Right? Most people don't even think about values when they go into a company. Right? You cannot be effective in a place where your values and the values of the organization don't meet. And yeah, that's not complicated, but it's a fundamental truth that if you get it wrong, prepare for depression and frustration and disappointment. Right? So it's one of those, this book is the fundamentals. Like, people are always looking for an epiphany of some sort. Oh, that book, it was amazing. Like, no, it's be disciplined and read this book, because if you understand all the principles in it and you apply them every day, get ready to win type thing. That's why the book is powerful. It's not because any of the points, and by the way, none of these books that we read today are new. We read these things like, oh my God, this book is so amazing. Yeah, this book was also written back in the 1700s by someone else, right? Dr. Robert Cialdini, Influence. That book was written back in 1853 by G.A. Chesterton. Like, it's nothing new under the sun. And we get so far away from the fundamentals sometimes because we're looking for this miracle. We're looking for Jesus to walk on water, when we just need to be aware of the fact that he's out helping people. And that's the thing he showed up to do every day and did well. And why he was so successful over time. Let's see. Ineffable Wound says, looking into it as well. My reservation programs like this is books that are related. My reservation with programs, I think is what you meant to say. Like this is books that are related to objectives, which would be a distraction for me at the moment. Like romantic relationships equals premature for me at the moment. So yeah, none of the books that I've recommended are about romantic relationships. Most of what I focus on is life and career success. Right? Those are most of the books that I tap into, is something that's going to help you put something in your brain that if you apply it, it's going to get you towards your optimal outcomes. He says I could just skip those. Yeah, you could. There's no romance books, and I don't do fiction. Like, it's all nonfiction. There's one fiction book I may put in there, but I don't read a lot of fiction. This does seem cool though because it's a social experience oriented around personal development with candor. Yeah. Most of the time, I talk about stuff like this with people in person. I get blank looks or affirmation that I'm really deep. Yeah. Yeah. Welcome to the club, brother. Or sister. I don't want to presume your gender. Ineffable Wound says it was the Marriage Works one. LOL. The irony that my focus fixated. Marriage Works. I didn't cover a Marriage Works book in the 52 book program. I do have a marriage. I did cover that book like in a book review a while back because I was using it for a program that I was building that I shut down. But honestly, that book is very helpful about human relationships in general. It's about marriage, um, but it's also about science. Like this is a guy, the doctor that put this together. He built his system to where he can tell if a couple is going to get divorced within 15 minutes of talking to them. Like with some crazy like 98% accuracy, he can predict whether or not that couple will last. And so there's a lot of science there's relational science in there that you would probably find interesting and helpful. uh, yeah, Seven Principles of Marriage, that's not in the 52 book challenge, but it's a great book, and like I said, it would help you in some other areas too. But I don't know if I'm going to cover that book in this 52 book challenge. I've just found most of the people that follow me aren't really too keen on relationship stuff compared to other things they want to talk about. Uh, but it's cool. Oh, so yeah, underneath signing up for the program are a bunch. It's just a bunch of sample book reviews that I've done. All of those books underneath that is misleading, or it's confusing. It's not misleading. All of those pictures underneath are just book reviews that I've done. Not all of those books are actually in the program. So you were right to make that assumption. That's on me. Jules says, I've never read the book, but I can almost bet he was looking at agreeableness between the two. Agreeableness was part of it, but it was also cooperation. He looks at how do people fight, and how you fight actually tells a lot. Tells people, it tells a trained professional how you fight or solve problems together is very telling of how well you're going to be able to stick together. But cool. Any other questions you guys got for me? Also, I know some folks like Jewel had hit me up, have applied for my social media master university. I have sent you all emails. I think, Jewel, I sent you one asking some specific questions. We go through an application process specifically for that program because, one, it's expensive. But two, I need to make sure that the program is actually going to be a good fit for you before we sell it to you, because I don't want to sell anything to anybody that ain't going to help them, right? It's very helpful. I think it can help everybody, but it may not help you in your specific situation. So if you're one of the people who applied and I sent you an email, hit me back, let me know, and we'll start the process. Um, I am, if you believe that you're a good fit, rarely will I turn somebody away who's really adamant about getting in. But we've had some people get in and they're like, yeah, because they didn't really think it through and they couldn't really articulate what they wanted. And they're like, I don't think I want to stick around. Right. So we try to avoid that because then that costs the person money. And then they have to wait. Like, we refund it, of course, but they have to wait to get their money back. You guys had asked me about creating the confidence course, which is coming. I hope to launch it next week. I did promise it would be out by June, so I'm going to do my darndest to finish recording it tonight and then doing the editing and all that stuff tomorrow or over the course of the next week so I can get it out to you guys hopefully next week, no later than the last week in June. If you're interested in that, let's see here. Let's get you guys some links. You can go to my coaching page. This will show you all of my programs, the free stuff, the paid stuff. We also have a sales mastery course there that's really powerful. It was taken from a live coaching I did with a bunch of my clients, and I walked them through for 3 hours. Like, this is how you have to do your sales. All right, so if you're in business or looking to get into business, sales is the foundation of your business succeeding. Before you learn anything else, you got to learn how to sell. right? So that's one of the first things we're teaching in our new nano courses. Let's see, Asian Pikachu says, I feel guilty about looking at all the titles of the challenge, but can't follow up due to financial strain. Don't feel guilty. Here's what I would recommend. Every book that you can't afford to go buy, go to YouTube and search the book. Someone will have reviewed it. I've reviewed. So if you can't buy the book, you can still watch the video review / summaries that I do, and at least you get a little something out of it. If reading 1% of a book every week is better than 0. That's the way I look at it. So if you can't afford to buy all the books, like, especially when we get to this book, because we're doing this one, this book's over $100, yo. So one of the things I'm going to recommend to people is I'm going to post a link. I'll probably post multiple links, but one of them will go to a used copy that's an older edition. Like, he updates it every year or every year and a half. So there's like, mine is, I think, either the newest or the second newest one, because I got it 2 years ago. But I mean, how different is it really, right? Like, it's not, it's going from happy to glad. It's not like the book sucked and now it's amazing, right? Dr. David Buss. And Dr. David Buss had a big hand in helping make the Hexaco test what it is today in the eyes of many. So, okay, any other questions before I go off to film things? Last call for preguntas, which is Spanish for questions, in case you didn't know. That was really patronizing. All right, I'll stand by. Any last minute questions? Christian Jackson says, this is truly a great video, Mr. Chambers. Keep up the good work, and I hope you will have a blessed Father's Day. I will. I'm going to try to surprise my kids, and I'm going to make everybody watch Transformers, the movie. And the real one, not the Michael Bay nonsense that's around today. Michael Bay trying to ruin my childhood. Okay, looks like we don't have any additional questions. I want to thank everybody for coming out. I pray you got something great out of tonight's discussion. I know I did. I always learn. I always get something good out of talking to you guys. That's why I love doing this. I would actually do this a lot more if time permitted. One day, when I can finally slow down in my business, right now we are laser focused on building. We have this vision for building a farm that's going to be a hub for community service, and I'm going to be able to coach some of you in person. We're going to be able to bring you out to a training facility that we're building. Sustainable energy, natural organic food that's not just feeding my family, but feeding the community and the people around us, helping farmers, because farmers are in dire straits right now, right? It's a huge vision. It's a huge dream that I've had for quite some time. A lot of it got solidified when I went to meet Joel Salatin. If you don't know who he is, look him up. Salatin. Joel. Amazing dude. When I met him, because I had heard him speak and I've sat through coaching that he's done before, but when I got to meet him and shake his hand, I walked away from his house just saying, Joel is the type of person that just being around him makes you a better person. Like, that's the type of people that I'm learning from. So, anyway, Basma says, NF Boone says, LOL, thanks, man. This is pretty cool. Enjoy. Thank you. Thanks for coming. Good to see you. Basma says, thanks for your time. That was really great. Asian Pikachu, is it okay if I do the challenge at my own pace because I'm really slow when it comes to these things? Absolutely. The challenge is designed for you, not for me. Your pace is the pace. JR Smallwood says, great video. Thank you, JR. Nigel Murillo says, hey, B, what's up? Hey, Nigel, thank you earlier for sending me the update that I screwed up the 69 Pillars upload. I have since fixed it. I don't know if you got my email that I sent you back, but thank you for the catch. It's been fixed. It was on me, not on you. Just watched the last 3 Pillars. Amazing. I know you got something. I actually filmed those today. Like, that was not, like, I filmed them a year ago and I filmed all 3 of those videos today. I was coaching I was watching my son's basketball team because I'm not coaching that team this year. I'm coaching my older son's team. And then I just went outside and started doing football drills. I was like, why don't I film while I'm out here running? Asian Pikachu says, you should look at the Twitter that I tagged you. That tweet picture looks like you. Okay, you've been fussing about this picture since we got here. Let's do it. Let's go to twitter.com, and I know this link's going to break, but that's cool. I can fix it. Shouldn't be too hard. All right, let's see. Let's look at the picture from Asian Pikachu. Yeah, not the first time I've gotten that reference or that comparison. Absolutely, man. Bosma says, I'm so interested to hear your thoughts on how would depression affect Ian. Oh, my bad. That's the old post. All right. Losing weight, Bryant. I see you. Losing weight. I'm not really trying to lose much weight. I'm happy with my weight. I'm trying to sustain my strength. Maybe lose a little bit. Like I'm around 13% body fat. I'd like to get down to about 8 or 9. But it's still really good for my age and how big I am. So not really trying to lose too much weight, just trying to cut up a little bit more, and then I'll be cool. And I don't. My problem is I don't want to lose my size. I worked really hard to be this big because I was a real skinny guy growing up. Anyway, I love you guys much. Remember always, we are stronger than I. I'll see you soon. Have a good night.